In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, August 29th, here in South Korea. President Yoon held a national briefing earlier this morning and a press conference to touch upon his administration's policy advancements thus far and the national tasks that lie ahead. On the international front, Israeli soldiers staged a massive offensive across the West Bank in the early hours of Wednesday to reportedly root out a terror infrastructure. Meanwhile, over in Paris, curtains went up for the opening ceremony of the Paralympic Games, with athletes parading the Champs-Élysées to Place de la Concorde, where the main event unfolded. We start on the local front this afternoon with details about the President's policy briefing and press conference that took place earlier on this Thursday morning. I have our senior correspondent, Oh Soo-young, standing by live with the latest. Soo-young, welcome.
Hi, Sunny.
Right, I'm sure it was a busy morning there. I hear the main focus, Soo-young, of the President's address this morning was his administration's pension reform. Let's start with that.
I'd be very happy to, Sunny. So President Yoon pushed for a new plan to basically overhaul the public pension scheme as South Korea's aging society faces the possible depletion of the national pension fund within 30 years' time by 2055. So this was a preview of what's to come in the government's soon-to-be announced pension reform plan next month. Now, President Yoon had clearly showed his administration's will to have a fundamental reform of the national pension scheme. There's long been talk of adjusting the current 8% premium and the 40% income replacement rate, which is how much of your lifetime's income can be covered by the pension payout that you get. However, in addition to these so-called parametric measures, President Yoon raised the need for total structural reform. This includes introducing an automatic stabilization system that adjusts the premium and income replacement rate depending on the economic and demographic conditions and changes as they happen. He also mentioned setting different rates of increase in how much the younger and older generations pay towards their pensions to ensure generational equity, along with pension credits for those whose payments might be stalled due to maternity leave or military service.
Right, and that, of course, has been the cause of some conflict, right, Soo-young, in the past?
That's right. So we need to remember that when the pension system was first introduced, it was designed generously so as to encourage people to join the scheme. But it was though expected that the premium rates and the income replacement rate would decrease over time. But that hasn't happened, and there's already a growing deficit as Korean society faces a declining population now and a rapidly aging society. This means that a shrinking pool of young adults are paying for the growing burden of pension payouts for the older generation. That's why the Yoon administration believes a structural overhaul is needed for long-term sustainability. Now, it might be contentious, but the President said he won't take the easy road.
개혁은 필연적으로 저항을 불러옵니다. 개혁 과정은 험난한 여정이 될 것입니다. 정치적 유불리만 따진다면 하지 않는 것이 훨씬 편한 길입니다. 역대 정부가 개혁에 실패하고 개혁을 시도조차 하지 않았던 이유가 이 때문입니다. 우리 사회의 지속 가능한 발전에 반드시 필요한 구조 개혁이 지금까지 이루어지지 않은 이유가 바로 이것입니다. 저는 쉬운 길을 가지 않겠습니다.
Right, that was a part of the President's address earlier this morning, speaking about taking the road not taken then. So, moving forward, beyond that pension reform, I do believe we're looking at similar initiatives for healthcare, education and labour.
That's right. The President renewed his pledge to also strengthen the medical system fundamentally nationwide, especially in hospitals outside the capital area, by increasing the number of doctors and improving their compensation schemes. He said that the whole structure will be changed for tertiary hospitals, which have been overly dependent on resident doctors. Specialists and clinical support nurses would also play crucial roles. On education, Yoon promised to deliver a public care system to ease the burden of child raising for working parents. On labour, he further pledged efforts to create a virtuous cycle of innovative growth for firms and a quality work environment for workers through labour market flexibility, as well as fair compensation that meets global standards. Now the +1 element of his 4+1 reforms, that's raising the chronically low birth rate, which cuts across most areas of his social reforms. Yoon said he would aim to create a work-life balance that young people desire and alleviate the burdens of childcare and housing to inspire stronger consideration of marriage and childbirth.
Right, and finally, Seong, were you able to ask him about his North Korea policy during the press conference, Seong?
Well, yes, indeed, I did have an opportunity to ask. And actually, in both his policy briefing and press conference, he emphasized his recently announced unification doctrine that was released about 2 weeks ago. And he highlighted how it's important in his approach towards North Korea by setting out this plan for a peaceful unification that extends freedom and human rights to North Koreans, and that's, of course, in line with South Korea's constitution. Another important question was on the future of Seoul's cooperation with Washington and Tokyo, given that the leaders of the US and Japan will be stepping down in the weeks and months to come. President Yoon made it clear that South Korea will continue to trust in the extended deterrence policy of the United States, as well as the Camp David trilateral cooperation with Japan that tie the three countries together.
All right, Seong, many thanks to you for that coverage. That was our senior correspondent, Oh Seong, with the latest from the President's public briefing and press conference earlier on this Thursday morning. Also on the local front, the government and ruling party are looking to raise the maximum prison sentence for those who commit deep fake crimes from the current 5 years to 7 amid a disturbing surge in the number of related offences involving minors. Our Shin Ha-young covers this intention and more.
Regarding the recent rise in digital sex crimes using sexually explicit deepfake images in South Korea, the government and the ruling party have agreed to strengthen penalties for those who make or send such content. After a meeting at the Nat'l Assembly on Thursday, the PPP's policy chief Kim Sang-un told reporters that they plan to increase the maximum sentence for producing and distributing fake images or videos from the current 5 years to 7 years, aligning it with the penalty for illegal recordings. They are also working on establishing a hotline with Telegram, a messaging app that has been used to share fake, sexually explicit images and videos to better deal with the issue of illegal content, given the difficulties in cooperation due to its overseas servers. The two sides are also considering creating a control tower within the Office for Government Policy Coordination to oversee and coordinate the response to deepfake crimes. Referring to recent deepfake abuse cases where many offenders were found to be law-breaching minors without criminal responsibility, PPP leader Han Dong-hoon emphasized the need for bipartisan agreement to lower the age threshold for law-breaching minors. Currently, law-breaching minors are children aged 10 to 14, subject to protective disposition instead of criminal penalty. Meanwhile, the country's education ministry on Wednesday warned that student offenders committing crimes against fellow students in school will face high levels of disciplinary action, including expulsion. In addition to expulsion, other possible disciplinary actions include mandatory voluntary hours, special education or counseling, and school transfers. The type of actions against offenders will depend on factors such as the severity of damage, as well as the duration and the intentionality of the offense. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, at the National Assembly back on Wednesday afternoon, in a rash of solidarity, ruling and opposition lawmakers passed a number of bills aimed at supporting public welfare and public well-being. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo explains.
On Wednesday, the 22nd National Assembly representatives were hard at work, hammering out 28 pieces of legislation that will impact many aspects of people's lives, tackling pending issues in real estate, energy, medical service, and more. In a rare show of consensus, all 295 lawmakers present at the plenary session voted to provide greater support for the victims of real estate rental scams. A revision to an existing act, this will guarantee the victims up to 20 years of residence in the property they've rented. Another proposal restricting the rights of parents to inherit their deceased sons or daughters' money and assets when they do not sufficiently carry out their parental duties passed with strong support. The so-called Kuhara bill is named after the late K-pop star whose mother and brother disputed over who would inherit the singer's money after her death. And perhaps the most fiercely debated, the revision to the current Nursing Act, which was tabled after a last-minute agreement in a late-night meeting of the Health and Welfare Committee. The rival lawmakers met halfway just hours before the plenary session and agreed to provide the legal basis for further medical practice by nurses who qualify to act as physician assistants.
This defines the additional roles of nurses with qualifying professional, clinical, and educational experience in providing medical service under a doctor's general guidance or delegation.
The Nursing Act aims to protect them so they can put all their attention and focus on providing medical care to patients and thereby ultimately protect the lives and health of the people.
This comes at an especially critical time as South Korea deals with a shortage of medical personnel at major hospitals after many doctors resigned in protest of medical school enrollment expansion, and just a day before the nurses planned protests calling for better working conditions. A goal since the previous assembly, the revision passed with 283 lawmakers voting for, 2 against, and 5 abstaining in an unprecedented bipartisan move toward a coalition by the current assembly.
But tensions still linger as the rival lawmakers prepare to discuss potential agendas for the much-anticipated meeting between their party leaders, PPP's Han and DP's Lee, which is expected in weeks. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, most hospital workers, including nurses, have cancelled their plan for collective action after sealing last-minute wage deals with their respective hospitals. The Korean Health and Medical Workers Union, whose members work at 62 medical entities nationwide, were scheduled to stage a strike starting this Thursday, aggravating concerns over healthcare amid the prolonged walkout by doctors in training. Out of the 62 medical entities under the union, 59 have suspended their strike plan, having successfully addressed wage hikes and work boundaries in the absence of doctors. This latest development also follows Wednesday's parliamentary approval of a bill that provides legal basis for physician assistant nurses to perform certain medical procedures under legal protection. In other news, the owner of the lithium battery factory in Hwasong, where a tragic fire back in June killed 23 workers, has been arrested. Citing the severity of the safety violations, the Suwon District Court approved the arrest warrant for Park Sun-gwan, the CEO of Arisol. According to authorities, the fire was fueled by a rush to meet a supply deadline and a failure to respond to signs of risky quality defects in the batteries. Park's arrest is the first under the Serious Accidents Punishment Act, which went into effect in 2022 to ensure safety at workplaces. A special strike operation drill involving South Korean and U.S. forces took place over a period of 5 days in Gwangju, Gyeonggi-do province. The drill, including American aerial assets, sought to bolster offensive strike capabilities and to master advanced combat skills before wrapping up this past Wednesday. The latest training came on the sidelines of the Ulchi Freedom Shield, which ended on this Thursday morning. But Seoul and Washington's combined outdoor exercises will continue until mid-September. The fate of over a dozen North Korean defectors remains in limbo as they have been detained in China for reportedly seeking to cross into South Korea. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
Several people cross a shallow river in darkness. This is a video footage released by a South Korean-based civic group, saying they're North Korean defectors who are trying to flee to South Korea. but were arrested by Chinese police. The group said 15 North Korean defectors, 13 women, and 2 children were arrested in Kunming in southern China, which shares a border with South Asian countries. They were trying to take a speedboat to cross into a Southeast Asian country, then onward to South Korea, but were arrested as they were preparing to board. They will likely be repatriated, a fate that awaits nearly all North Korean escapees in Chinese police custody, and will likely be severely punished once they return to the north. The South Korean government said it's currently verifying the civic group's claim, while reiterating that North Korean defectors should not be forcibly sent back.
Our position is that under no circumstances should North Korean defectors residing abroad be forcibly repatriated against their will.
Separately, South Korea's National Intelligence Service said Wednesday that since the COVID-19 pandemic started to slow down in the second half of last year, there has been an increase in the number of North Korean defectors who used to work in foreign embassies or as foreign currency workers. But the agency noted that the number is less than the figure recorded when former leader Kim Jong-il led the regime. It also said an increase in this number is not necessarily a sign of instability in Kim Jong-un's regime, but added that it's closely monitoring these changes. In fact, in November, a senior North Korean diplomat based in Cuba defected with his wife and child to South Korea. And the Korean government has been saying the number of elite North Koreans with professional jobs escaping to the south has steadily increased in recent years. 배은지, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, Israeli soldiers staged a massive operation across the West Bank in the early hours of Wednesday to reportedly root out a terror infrastructure. Our Lee Seung-jae has details.
With Israel continuing its offensives in Gaza, its military is also expanding attacks in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli military on Wednesday carried out raids and airstrikes in northern regions of the West Bank, killing at least 10 Palestinians. The Israel Defense Forces said that it was part of a counter-terror operation, combining the use of drones and bulldozers, but also military and security forces. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz said the latest operation aims to thwart Islamic Iranian terrorist infrastructure, adding that Tehran was looking to form an eastern front against Israel. He added that threats in the West Bank must be dealt with in the same way as in Gaza. An IDF spokesperson said Wednesday that Israel had identified the smuggling of weapons and explosives into the region by Iran. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza may further worsen, as the World Food Program announced it will be halting all aid movement in the enclave. This comes as one of its vehicles was hit with repeated gunfire close to an Israeli checkpoint. The agency said that despite the vehicle being clearly marked and having received multiple clearances by Israeli authorities to approach the checkpoint, the vehicle was fired at repeatedly. None of the passengers were harmed, but an image released by the WFP showed that at least 10 bullets hit the vehicle. The agency has been crucial in its distribution of food throughout Gaza, as famine has been widespread for months. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights also reported Wednesday that the Israeli military bombed a car passing through a Syrian border checkpoint near the Lebanese border, killing 4 people. The Civil War Monitoring Group said a car exploded in a drone attack and that 3 Palestinians and 1 Lebanese national were killed. However, according to a Reuters report citing a local security source, the 3 Palestinians were members of the Islamic Jihad, while the Lebanese national was a member of Hezbollah. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In Paris, the 2024 Paralympic Games began with a flamboyant opening ceremony Wednesday evening as over 4,000 athletes from some 170 delegations prepared to compete in 22 sports categories for 11 days. Our Ian Jin has the highlights.
The opening ceremony of the 2024 Paralympics began on Wednesday night with French President Emmanuel Macron officially opening the event. The 168 delegation athletes parade started from the bottom of the Champs-Élysées, with some 50,000 people watching the ceremony in the stands erected in Place de la Concorde in central Paris. And as was the case for this summer's Olympics, when the opening ceremony was held on the River Seine in July, the curtain raiser for the Paralympics was, for the first time in history, held outdoors rather than inside a stadium. During the ceremony, fighter planes flew overhead, leaving red, white, and blue vapor trails in the colors of the French national flag before the delegations entered the square. Lucky Love, a French singer who was born with one arm, was joined by performers in wheelchairs when he sang on stage. Then, as the national anthem played, the Luxor obelisk lit up in the colors of the French flag. 4,400 athletes with physical, visual, and intellectual impairments will compete in 22 disciplines over 11 days until the closing ceremony on Sunday, September 8th. Events will take place in 18 of the 35 Olympics venues in the city. Organizers say ticket sales that had been sluggish since the Olympics had picked up, and more than 2 million of the 2.8 million tickets were sold for the various Paralympic events, with several venues sold out. Competitions begin on Thursday, and the first medals to be handed out will be in taekwondo, table tennis, swimming, and track cycling. Athletes are grouped by impairment levels to ensure as level a playing field as possible. At the 2024 Paris Paralympics, South Korea has 83 athletes competing in 17 different disciplines. 이은진, Arirang News.
Let's move on to the world now. Berkshire Hathaway, the conglomerate led by investor Warren Buffett, has surpassed $1 trillion in market value. This places Berkshire Hathaway in an exclusive group of just 6 other companies, including Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. It is also the only one of the trillion-dollar group that isn't a big tech company. Buffett, who is just about to turn 94, has been at the helm of Berkshire since 1965. Under his leadership, the company's shares have skyrocketed by over 5.6 million%, an annual growth of 20%. Berkshire Hathaway's vast portfolio includes brands like American Express, Coca-Cola, and Bank of America, along with a significant stake in Apple, despite selling off more than half of its shares this year. Despite donating over half of his shares to charity, Buffett still owns over 14% of the company. His net worth is estimated at $145 billion, making him the 6th richest person in the world, according to Forbes. The second quarter results for tech giant Nvidia have gone above expectations. The company's earnings report showed adjusted earnings of 68 cents per share and $30 billion in revenue. This surpassed analysts' expectations of 64 cents per share earnings and $28.8 billion revenue. Nvidia also projected third quarter revenue of $32.5 billion, which is above analyst predictions. The company also approved a $50 billion share buyback, but despite the strong numbers, Nvidia's stock dropped 6% following the announcement. Nvidia has become a dominant force in the artificial intelligence sector, growing into one of the world's largest companies by market capitalization. Tech giants are investing heavily in the company's chips and data centers, which are crucial for training and operating their AI systems. Jensen Huang, founder and CEO of Nvidia, has told analysts that investors in Nvidia are getting returns right away and that, quote, it is the best ROI computing infrastructure investment you can make today. The 81st Venice Film Festival kicked off on Wednesday local time with a star-studded gala drawing filmmakers and cinema enthusiasts from across the globe. Hollywood legend Sigourney Weaver, known for her roles in Alien and Avatar, was honored with the Golden Lion Lifetime Achievement Award. Weaver's celebrated career spans 5 decades of critical and commercial success. Following the ceremony, attendees of the festival were treated a premiere screening of Tim Burton's Beetlejuice. Walter Lee, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Typhoon Shanshan has made landfall in Japan's southwestern prefecture of Kagoshima this morning. That typhoon will also have indirect impact on parts of Korea's south and east sea, with high seas watches and a typhoon warning being in place. Also, strong wind advisory has been issued to Busan and nearby areas, as well as Jeju Island. Strong easterly winds will bring showers to the east coast and Jeju with up to 60 millimeters in the forecast until Friday. So those of you in the east need to brace for a strong weather system today. Meanwhile, western parts of Korea are having midsummer level heat, with Seoul and Gwangju expected to top out at 34 degrees Celsius under sunny skies. And this morning, Jeju woke up to the longest run of tropical nights on record at 45 and should see a high of 32 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Now, those of us in the capital area need to brace for strong afternoon heat throughout the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, that ends our Thursday afternoon newscast. Do stay with us for our panel session coming up right after this break.